Yeah, trick question. So what's the place that's made romantic by Alex the lion escaping from New York Zoo and then falling out of the sky with a whole bunch of penguins in a broken aeroplane in which there is a giraffe in love with a hippo?
I love you, Gloria. I always have.
To move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it.
Yeah, me and a whole bunch of cows welcome you to Madagascar.
Move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it. She like to move it, move it. He like to.
Here is the Grover. This is the old royal palace of the Malagasys. You know, Madagascar was only founded about 2,000 years ago, and most of its history, it was ruled by various kingdoms. And this fortified palace on the highest hill around the capital, Antananarivo, was designed by a Scottish man. The palace itself was gutted by fire in 1995, which is why, well, you can see right through it, and they've started the renovations of it. And it will be some time before you're allowed back in again. But given the magnificent views from the top of the hill here, you can understand why this was the place they decided to build a fortified palace. Other than the one royal palace, of course, Antananarivo, like a lot of developing countries, has its slum areas and people living on the sides of garbage tips or behind markets, relying upon putrid and dirty water for day-to-day activities, but maintaining a smile while standing around some horrid rubbish. Young people working in markets, carrying bricks, or all sorts of other activities that are needed to be done to bring money in, still managing to smile and laugh at the times when they can be just kids, maintaining human dignity and a smile on their face, concentrating sometimes on what it is that they have, not what it is that they don't have, yet their poverty still reaches out. That's Antananarivo. We're in Nosy Bay in Madagascar, and we're doing some quad biking. And funnily enough, you know you're not going to be doing any radical quad biking when your guide is on a motor scooter. Here we have a female chameleon. A cruel person would say all females are chameleons of whatever species, changing colour whichever way it suits them. But this one is a Madagascan female chameleon. This is Mora Mora waterfall. Mora Mora means slowly, slowly, and it's said to be sacred, and pregnant women will make an offering here to help with the pregnancy. Madagascar, like a lot of African countries, is a country full of juxtapositions and contradictions of different sorts of automobiles driving by and all sorts of levels of wealth. Don't get me wrong, there are some people in this country that are phenomenally rich, but others that are scraping well below the bottom of the poverty barrel. But you'll still see kids running around with big smiles on their faces, with distended bellies, giving away their level of malnutrition, and yet others who will be going around in their school uniforms also with smiles on their faces, because they understand that education is a privilege, not a right. It's one of the things here in Madagascar. So look-see time. If we're going to be in Madagascar, we might as well go to the jungle and see what we can see. Many things in the jungle have evolved, so they're very hard to see. Let me show you a couple of reptiles that live on the sides of trees, and if you don't look closely you'll miss them. If I had one of those scratch and sniff things for this part of the Madagascan jungle, it would smell just like vanilla, because there's lots of wild vanilla growing here. It smells like Jock's ice cream. For some people it's very happy to know that lemurs are female-dominated species. and the males will only eat after the females have. We've come across a small group of males here who are eating some jackfruit on the ground, and hence most of the females must have already eaten.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it. She like to move it, move it. He like to move it, move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it. She like to move it, move it. He like to move it.
Gonna put the world away for a minute, pretend I don't live in it. Sunshine gonna wash my blues away.
Certainly when you get away from Antananarivo, you hit some of the more idealistic and beautiful parts of Madagascar, like this beach in the south of Nosy Bay. Mind you, you still reach poor levels of poverty, poor ablutions and sanitation, as well as garbage all around the place. I mean, that's the latrine set for this entire village. I'm on the top of a small island called Nosy Tranakala, which derives from the local language as small island, imaginatively named because it's next to Nosy Bay, Big Island. There are two islands off the northwest coast of Madagascar, and you can see from this old, now disused lighthouse a magnificent 360-degree view from which you can see around about a dozen calderas of volcanoes. Most of Madagascar is volcanic and built from those volcanoes split between the Indian Ocean plate and the African continental plate. So Madagascar here hasn't been around that long in terms of human settlement. Only settled about 2,000 years ago, and the population here is mixed between Indian, African, Arabic, really showing the mix of trading routes that used to pass through here. For most of its couple of thousand years, different royal clans feuded over the territory, the strongest becoming the Marina clan that ruled until the French basically took over the place. When did they do that? Late 1800s, I think early 1900s, and finally grabbed independence in 1960. So before we jump across the road to Comores, what are my final thoughts about Madagascar? Well, firstly, the capital, Antananarivo, is a shithole. It has water so putrid that it's beyond description. Slums like you would expect in a lot of the developing world, but none of the positive architecture or cultural icons or museums that would attract you to the place. You can go to the rest of Madagascar, which is really, really pretty, except for one thing. To get to the rest of Madagascar, you need to fly Air Madagascar. And I'm not so concerned about the safety, it's its on-time performance. And when I talk about on time, I don't mean it being an hour or two late, I mean whether your flight leaves or arrives the same week as you've planned.